Well, various phrases have been used: cliff edges, precipice, and you can begin to trace when we have been at this very tipping edge. Like people have pointed out at today's event, colonialism itself was a tipping edge for our country. Independence has not resolved that contradiction, because those who took over governance continued with the same structure that ensure that only very few people benefit from the entire resources of the wealth and country. The population of the country is growing in millions, 200 million plus today. This 200 million plus population demands basic necessities, of life to keep themselves alive, to keep themselves going, to put themselves in a state where they can begin to contribute into human civilization. Painfully for all of us, these basic necessities are denied them. Even in the fact that they see that they are existing in a river of abundance where everything is overflowing. Everything that is required to make life beautiful in this part of the universe overflows in huge quantities and qualities. But as things were, we run a system where only a very few, and these few year in, year out, are becoming restricted. And not just restricted, the competition among them as to who take what portion of the loot of the Nigerians' wealth has left them with no other choice than to engage, and has left them with no other choice than to fall back to using as many divisive methods as much as possible to divide the mass of the working people against themselves, to ensure that at no time will the mass of the working people themselves become organized, become a united force to take on the entirety of what of the ruling class. And we have seen this clearly played out during the 2023 general election. While for a lot of the mass of the working people, a general election should offer the mass of the working people an opportunity to use the electoral platform as a means by which they can engage the ruling elite, as a means by which they can engage the polity, as a means by which they can bring their own issues to become the basis of discourse, to become the basis of governance. But yet we have seen in all of the electoral campaigns that the working masses were not at the center of any of these issues. The issues, of course, like we have seen with the APC, with its Emilocon philosophy, is that it is our what? It's our turn. Just like we have seen in the media today, O.J. Kalu has also, launched that phrase on us in preparation for 2027, when he now says that it is my turn. So, but we must pose this question: this philosophy of turn by the ruling class does not even succeed in developing the regions from which they come from. So if it's a philosophy of saying that Nigeria will be developed from one turn to another turn, possibly maybe the working masses will be patient enough. So if it is this man's turn, these 4 years, it means that these 4 years, all of the questions of existentialism, will be resolved. But what happens to every other person who is not from that particular region? But even this little aspect is not fulfilled by this philosophy of my turn, it is my turn. Or it is the ruling class of what of my turn. So, and this is the point was made quite clear. When they use this philosophy of turn by turn, the ruling class only want a principle by which they will not have to share blood among themselves in resolving who becomes the titular head of sharing the loot of what of the country. So the point must be quite clear. This philosophy of turn by is not a philosophy that defines that it is the turn of the ruling class of this part of this country to develop the Nigerian society. Because if that is the principle, all of the turns that have taken place since 1960 will have resulted into the development of Nigeria. I must say that what is missing in terms of carrying out the revolution is not the mass of the working people at no point in time. Fundamentally, it is a question of leadership. But when you pose that leadership, you go to the next question of posing what program is that leadership presenting to what? To the mass of what? Of the working people. These are the two key factors that have been missing. And if you trace our history, even restricting ourselves to modern political history, beginning from the June 12th movement, the mass of the working people have clearly demonstrated their willingness to want to seize their destiny in their own hands. All of the movements through the June 12th movement, through the general strike, through to the NSAS movement, this, from one point to another point, are clear indications of the mass of the working people willing to get organized, willing to independently, on the basis of their own struggle, take on what? The ruling class. But I must point out that in all of these attempts, they have been attempts with sections of the ruling class in the leadership. In the June 12th movement, one of the fundamental basis for the failure of that movement ultimately, was that the leadership of that movement, which was to come into power on the basis of whatever that victory was not ready to come to power on the basis of the struggle of the mass of the working people. And if you come into the massive general strikes, which was national, which covered all parts of the country, the labor leaders were unwilling to take on the ruling class. And the reason for this too was also clear. The labor leaders did not pose any clear economic philosophical alternative to what programs the ruling class was pointing out. And in this book, we pointed out that Obasanjo, one of the reasons Obasanjo declared his enmity with Adams Oshiomhole was that he said that they had consulted with Adams Oshiomhole and co. In relation to launching their deregulation program, so that they were shocked that he would be the one stabbing them in the back when they all sat on the table to discuss and agree that this. If Obasanjo even said that it was the labor leaders themselves that were telling them to not use the word deregulation, to use the word liberalization, to characterize the program. So you have a situation again where the mass of the working people were willing, committed, opposed to deregulation, opposed to privatization, and in principle opposed to capitalism. But you had a leadership that was not opposed to those programs. And ultimately, that type of movement will ultimately what? Crash. And we have seen what that example ultimately represented. What the Adams Oshiomhole example in the labor movement ultimately represented is definition of politics within that particular framework. I've started a new work with the intention of taking up the concept of a revolution, if it can happen here, and those reasons that will also explain why it is possible to happen here, and what role all of us can play in that particular respect. All of the outline has already been drawn, and hopefully in the next 1 year and a half, that publication should be ready.
Thank you so much.